Today is September 8th, 2020. Thanks for being here. I am Phil Centonze. I'm the program chair for ASQ section 1510, which is Southeast Florida, of course. Some of you from out of state might not have known that. But welcome to this presentation. And if you'd like to know more about the section, ASQ Southeast Florida section 1510, you can check the communities tab on the myasq.org website. And you can join our LinkedIn group if you're not already a member, which is the ASQ Southeast Florida Section 1510 group. This event is being recorded and will be uploaded to the ASQ 1510 YouTube channel sometime in the next day or so, usually within a day. I've been able to get it up there. Got to do a little editing, take off the front ends and the back ends. And you will also have a copy of the PDF slides of the presentation will be uploaded to the LinkedIn site. And for tonight's presentation, there's another document that you'll have a link to through LinkedIn, and it's the Sterling Resources Guide. And it looks kind of like this. If you can see that in my hand, it's I don't know, maybe a little more than a 1/4 inch thick, but it has all the criteria. It has a lot of information in there that I will touch upon some of that this evening, but absolutely not go through the entire guide. It's just way too much. So anyway, like I said, this is being recorded, and you'll have access to those documents. So during the presentation, if you don't mind, please keep your audio muted. And we will open for questions actually anytime. If you've got questions during the presentation, just signal me somehow, or you can use the chat box. I'll be watching that. At least I'm one of my eyes will be watching that anyway, while the other 3 or 4 are watching other things. But we will we may have we will have time to answer questions for you through the presentation. Let me see. Catalina, I don't think is here. Do any of our board members, ASQ 1510 board members, have any announcements you'd like to make before we get started?
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Mindy. Is that Mindy? Go ahead, Mindy.
That's Mindy. Yes. Yeah. So I just want to say that we are filling our board for 2021. So if anybody is interested in joining, please send me an email at mindygross@bellsouth.net. It was on the presentation at the beginning, and I'll let you know what positions we have available to get new people involved in our board. Thank you.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Yeah, please be sure you contact Mindy if you're interested in just even finding out about the board and some of the open positions. It's
one of the benefit of the board is, Mindy, if you don't mind me adding that, is you get recertification unit for serving on the board.
Yes, thank you, Hervé.
Okay.
That's not why we do it, though. If you're going after it for recertification units,
no, that's right.
Not the right reason.
That is not
a chance to meet a bunch of wonderful people and get involved with the community, and that's why we do it. Oh, we do have a student branch coming up at the end of this month, and that will be our alumni event, and you'll hear more about that. So, that's it.
Okay, good. That'll be posted on LinkedIn and on the website, Steve? Yes. Okay, good. All right. Now to the presentation. So I'll be doing the presentation tonight. I'm currently working with Florida Makes, which is a not-for-profit organization affiliated with the federal government. We help manufacturers in Florida improve their productivity and their technical performance. We bring in the right expertise and the resources to help them do that. I've also founded my own consulting company called Pos Impact, which through Florida Makes and through my own company, I've been involved in performance improvement for about 20 years. Well, in the consulting world for about 20 years, and actually involved in performance improvement in organizations for about another 10 years or so before that. So it's been quite a while. I'm currently the lead judge for the Governor Sterling Award panel, and been the lead judge for the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years or so. And before that, I was a master examiner with the Florida Sterling Council. All told, I've been involved as a volunteer with Florida Sterling since 1994. So it's been a long time. It's hard to remember back to 1994 sometimes. But like I say, I've been involved with that for a long time. And I was actually a Baldrige examiner only for 1 year because I couldn't, it just takes a lot of time to be an examiner, and I couldn't do both for a long period of time. If any of you, has anybody ever been an examiner or been involved in any of those programs? Okay, well, you're going to learn a little bit more about it here tonight. And if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me anytime. You can call me or email me or text me or whatever. But if you're interested in finding out more beyond what I talk about tonight, feel free to let me know. Let me bring up the presentation. Let's see, I want to share this with you. Okay, you should see that, and now you should see the presentation, the slideshow rather. There we go. Okay. All right, and you can use the chat box, by the way, during anytime during the evening if you have any comments. And I should have said also that if you have any comments about the networking, I've got to figure out that little glitch about why the rooms didn't get mixed up like they were supposed to. But I know, Steve, I never answered your your request for help, but I knew that's what it was about. But in any case, use the chat box for any kind of comments or whatever, and we'll take it from there. I'll help you out as best I can. So tonight, the Florida Sterling Performance Management System, which is an integrated approach to performance excellence. What I'm going to talk about is an overview of the framework, and you will have the guide, the resource guide. As I said, you'll have that available in a PDF form to review and to keep. These get printed every year by the Florida Sterling Council. This year they have not yet for reasons, well, just because of the virtual nature of our work nowadays, but it hasn't been printed yet, but they will be printed. They're usually printed up and distributed at the annual Sterling Conference, which is at the end of May and beginning of June. There was no conference this year. And so they weren't printed for that, but they are available and they will be printed here in the very near future, as I understand. So the Florida Sterling Council was modeled on the Malcolm Baldrige program. Malcolm Baldrige is a program coming out of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and NIST, actually the National Institute of Standards and Technology, was established in 1987 by Congress. And the whole point behind Baldrige was to recognize U.S. companies, that were high performing. The Governor Sterling Award program, the Florida Sterling Council, was created a few years after Baldrige had been created. But it was, of course, for Florida to promote the competitive edge and the quality of life by recognizing high performing organizations and assessing high performing and promoting high performance within the Florida economy. There's over the years, the organizations have changed a little bit. In the entire country, there are probably about 38 different organizations that are part of the National Alliance, the Baldrige Alliance, they call it. Not every state has their own award. In some places, the award programs are multi-state, so they're regional. And in fact, Florida is part of a regional group as well. It's Florida and Georgia. You see there on the slide, the Georgia Oglethorpe Award. That program was in trouble, was falling apart, didn't really have a lot of support. So they asked Florida Sterling to help, and so they merged with the Florida Sterling. So now the Florida Sterling Council looks over the Florida program and the Baldrige, the Georgia program as well. All the criteria and the framework are identical to Baldrige, nearly identical. There are a couple of word changes, but but they all work on the same, you know, view, the same perspective, which is a systems perspective, as you can see. So it really starts with the core values and concepts. And that's the target. That's really the objective of the program, is to embed and to help organizations actually realize the core values and concepts that are identified by Baldrige and Sterling. Core values like, and you'll see this in a later slide, but it's like visionary leadership, a systems perspective, customer focus, customer excellence, data-based, you know, decision-making, all those kinds of core values that that really fit into, you know, that fit into high-performing organizations. So with this diagram that you see here, on the three boxes on the left, or that the triangular and those two other boxes on the left, leadership, strategy, and customers, those are the first three categories of the criteria. And those three together are considered the leadership triad, or the leadership driver of an organization. You know, at a high level, you know, the leadership team talks with and relates with customers to understand their needs and their requirements going forward, and then develop strategy to meet those, again, at a high level. On the right-hand side, you see workforce, operations, and results. The workforce and the operations, the processes, if you will, instead of operations, but the processes in the workforce are how that strategy gets implemented. And then results are just what it sounds like. They're the results, the metrics, the measures, the data that comes out to tell you whether or not, you know, what you implemented was effective. And all of that really sits on that lower, you see a lower dark box there, says measurement, analysis, and knowledge management. That's actually category number 4 of the criteria. But what that does is, you know, really has the base of process within the organization, you know, based in data and in knowledge management. We'll talk a little bit more about those as we go through this. But that's, you know, that's the core of the organization there. And you see that word integration in the middle. It really, everything is connected. You know, what happens in one end of an organization, or one part of an organization, will affect every other part. You know, nothing is isolated within any organization. And that's part of the systems perspective that we see in the core values. And you'll see that the entire model is under the organizational profile. The organizational profile really sets the context for what an organization is, what's important to that organization, how is it unique and different from other organizations, even in the same industry. You know, the organizational profile will help an organization really identify what the pressures and the influences are on that company, on that organization, from inside and external. It doesn't matter. It's all of that. It takes a look at that. So you could have two companies, exactly, you know, the same industry. They do basically the same kind of things. One's a 5-person company, and right next door is the 500-person company. Obviously, their profile is different just in size alone, but size is not the only way that's measured. Just in size alone, so that, you know, processes might be very high performing in the small company, in the 5-person company. Those same processes and procedures, if you move them over to the 500-person company, might not, you know, fit the bill. It may not be, and most likely would not be, a high-performing process. So the organizational profile really helps if you're an examiner, if you're evaluating a company based on the Baldrige or the Sterling criteria. You know, the profile really sets the context and helps understand how the criteria should be applied to that organization. And as a result, you know, you know, what the results are, what the leadership processes are, strategies, customers, systems, processes, all those kinds of things, how they all fit together. Okay. So, and that, by the way, you'll see that's on in the resource guide, that diagram that you'll see. So when we talk about the systems emphasis, oh, I know, wait, before I do that, there was a poll that I wanted to, a question that I just wanted to throw up there for you. Let's see. Okay, so just take a look at that. If you don't mind, just click the response that you think that you'd like to respond with. And it says, not all departments in a company may be able to impact profitability. True or false? We'll give it maybe another 10 seconds or so. Okay. All right. Well, can you see the results? No, not yet. You should be able to see it now, and you'll see that false 65%. So 2-to-1 against, and that's the correct. That is false is the correct answer for that. As I said, systems emphasis, systems perspective really means that anything that happens in one end of a company will affect everything else all the way to the other end. When you think about a company that's growing, that maybe has a strategy because of its customer needs, has a strategy for implementing more technology or new technology into the company to be able to address the production needs that will be coming. Well, what does that mean? If you're going to increase the technology, what does that mean? Well, that connects to workforce, right? In workforce, you've got to be able to make sure you have the right talent and the right skills available within the organization to be able to use the new technology. It might take you to processes. What's going to happen. So another part of the organization, the production processes. What's going to happen to production and all those processes when new technologies are introduced and how you implement the new technology. So you can see that everything is linked. That's a word that you hear a lot of when you're talking Sterling and Sterling criteria, is the linkages between one aspect and multi other aspects within the criteria. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so you've got just the systems emphasis again is really important. Where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and you can see some of the different kind of terminology and different kind of mindset you might have on the system side versus the individual, more siloed type of thinking, where you're looking at systemic root causes as opposed to process root causes, where you're looking at the organizational goals instead of just process targets and process goals. You're looking at preventive actions instead of reactive actions, and so on, all the way through. Okay. So one thing about the Sterling criteria and Baldrige criteria is that it's improvement oriented, not compliance oriented. Many of us have dealt with ISO quality systems, which are very compliance oriented. Where the adherence is to a predefined standard. The compliance may be established on a snapshot basis, as it says there. It doesn't necessarily mean process effectiveness or performance. We've all seen ISO 9001, for example, change and improve over the years. Back in the 90s, I met Joseph Duran, and I saw him speak several times. And every time he spoke, he would tell a story that, back then, if you were ISO certified organization, you could make a life jacket out of concrete and it would be in compliance with the standards, but it did not take effectiveness into account at that time. Now that's changed. Now, as you know, if you dealt with any of the ISO quality systems, you know that effectiveness is starting to bleed into, or has started to bleed into the quality systems to look at effectiveness of the systems. And on the improvement side, we're looking more for the process improvement over time and looking at the continuous improvement for achieving higher performance and higher effectiveness. You're complying with the existing procedures as a baseline, but it's part of your improvement momentum and the improvement initiative going forward. It's not just compliance with procedures. And the Sterling and the Baldrige criteria, not very prescriptive. Whereas in other kinds of systems, it's very prescriptive. Even some of the private corporation systems, if you work for or ever knew anything about Pratt and Whitney, or any of the United Technologies companies, they had a program called ACE. And I tell you the truth, I can't remember what that acronym stands for. I don't remember that. But it was a system that was very prescriptive, and it told the organizations, very, very specifically how they should run their operations as far as, what processes and how the processes should be documented and all those kinds of things. It was much more prescriptive. And Sterling is not like that. Sterling asks a lot of questions, a lot of how questions. How is looking for process and looking for system. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, so the management system really looks like this pyramid. You've got the core values and the concepts as the foundation. You've got something called the scoring ranges, which really indicates the maturity, and the progress of an organization and the maturity of an organization over time, but over the course of implementing and using the criteria, that continuous improvement mindset. And then you've got the organizational profile, which I talked a little bit about, and then the criteria part of that, the first 6 categories. First 6 categories of the criteria are process categories, the how questions that you'll see, and the results are just what it sounds like. It's actual data. So let's go in. So the first thing I'd like to ask you to just, and you could speak up if you'd like, or put something into the chat. Just think about what are some of the characteristics of a high-performing organization. It may be your organization now, which is high-performing, that you think, or it may have a characteristic of a high-performing organization, or some organization that you've been involved with and related to in the past. What do you think? What are some of the characteristics that you would attribute to a high-performing organization?
I would say, Phil, teamwork is one of them. I think the
teamwork.
whole organization working as a team toward the same common goal.
Okay. What else?
They don't punish people for pointing out mistakes before they happen, or bring attention to different things that may bring down the organization.
Okay, so yeah, so instead of a blame type of situation, you're talking about an improvement type of situation. Is that what you said?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Phil,
That was Raheem. Okay, go ahead, Eduardo.
innovation as part of the culture of the organization. Innovation.
Yeah. Innovation, right. That's what you'd see in high-performing organizations, right? What else? What other kinds of things?
Yeah, I'd say two-way communications that's structured somehow.
Okay, two-way communications. That's, yes, a very structured communication. That's part of what Hervé talked about in the way of teamwork, right? I mean, you need, that's an absolutely essential for teamwork is communication, open two-way communication, and structured.
I would say adaptability. Oh,
I'm sorry, there were 2 I heard there. Michonne,
You
go
can
ahead.
go.
Yeah. Okay, I was saying adaptability. Just like in these times, we've had to flex and pivot to this new normal. So adaptability.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and we see that every day. I mean, even with Publix, if you go to Publix, now they have curbside pickup at some of their locations. They've had to adapt their processes to what the customer's looking for, and that's us. Someone else had a question? I had a comment. I missed it.
I was saying direction.
I'm sorry.
I was saying direction.
Okay. Common direction or
a common goal.
Okay. Whoops.
And I would say ongoing training all the time.
Okay. So focus on the workforce, right?
Empowering employees.
What was that? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Empowering employees.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, and there's probably a lot of others, right? There's at least 11, as you can see on the screen, that I think. These are the core values and concepts of Sterling, of the Baldrige style, evaluation, the Baldrige style framework. As you can see, the systems perspective is that, you can almost take that title off of that slide and put, behaviors or characteristics of high-performing organizations, because that's what high-performing organizations, all the things that you guys talked about just now, fit in there somewhere, right? You're talking about valuing people, that's empowerment. That's, valuing people by, you train people, that shows respect for them and it shows valuing them. Talked about, visionary leadership. Somebody said, I forgot who that was, Michonne maybe, said direction. You talked about direction. You have visionary leadership there. You've got the adaptability. Where would that fit, do you think? Organizational learning and agility, maybe, and maybe in focus on success. So all of those things that you all talked about you know, are part of the core values and the core concepts that underlie the entire, you know, Sterling framework, the Sterling performance management framework. Any questions about any of that? Okay.
I had a question.
Yes.
About the organizational profile. So it sounds like these are attributes of the company. And would you analyze this, or would this be, analyzed through a SWOT analysis? How would you make that comparison as the person looking at the different companies?
Okay, you would ask questions, and the criteria themselves. And I could bring up a little sample and just show you some of the questions there from that resource guide there. I'll do that in a little bit, but yeah, you know, the questions of the criteria, like I said, in categories one through 6, and we're going to talk about what specifically each one of those are. But the questions are how questions, HOW. You know, how do you do this? How do you do that? Because the criteria are interested in what's your process. You may have a process that's completely different from the process of the company down the street, but it may be effective for what you're doing, and it may be very well aligned and integrated with your company goals, your objectives, your targets, and it can help you get to be effective. And effective means able to reach what it is that's important to you. I don't know if that answers your question or not. I think there's going to be more information coming that will help answer that. Does that do you any? Did that do you any good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that was the core values and concepts, the foundation of the entire model. You know, here is something called the scoring ranges, as I mentioned. And the scoring ranges in the guide, I'll show you a sample here in another minute. But let's go to, oh, I know, before I do that, I wanted to just pop another poll for you, a polling question. So just here's a poll about learning, okay? In an organization, you should see that now, learning can be evidenced how? By fact-based analysis and demonstrated improvement cycles, by new knowledge and skills acquired by employees, by sharing of best practices, all of the above or none of the above? What do you think? Can't fool you. Okay. Okay, it's overwhelmingly all of the above. And that's true. It is all of the above. There's a lot of different facets of learning. And what I'm going to show you now is the process maturity elements of, oh, I didn't show you results here. There they are. There's the results. You can see overwhelmingly all of the above. And it is all of those above. Okay. So this next slide that you see here is something called, you know, in the Sterling Ease is called ADLI, A-D-L-I plus I. And this is really a matter for how you evaluate. This sort of touches on the question that you just posed, by the way. You know, how do you evaluate the process or the system in an organization? And you're looking at ADLI, and if you're an examiner, it's the plus I, the plus innovation. For the public, what you're going to see in the resource guide is ADLI. You're not going to see that plus I, although innovation is talked about in a lot of different places in the criteria, in the scoring, and all. But in order for a process to be high performing, you've got to have a process in the first place. That's approach. You know, how work gets done, it's got to be systematic, repeatable, measurable. If you don't have an approach, then the rest of it doesn't really mean anything. It's moot. But if you have an approach, then you can look at deployment, learning, and integration. And there's no order to those. DL and I could be ILD, it could be LDI, it could be IDL, it doesn't matter. It all starts with the approach. The approach is the threshold. You know, to get in the door, you've got to have an approach. When you get to deployment, you're looking at how well is that process or that approach being applied and being used consistently and appropriately throughout the organization. So you can have a very, very good approach, as a leadership team. Let's say, you've got a great approach on process, on doing anything. Let's say process A. It's a great process, but it's not being used anywhere. That means deployment is basically a zero, which means that approach, no matter how great the approach is, if it's not being used and not being used where it should be used, then it's not very high performing. For instance, let's say any customer satisfaction, determination process that you might have in an organization. Let's say you've got a great process, maybe it includes surveys or focus groups or whatever, but it's intended for, where it's appropriate to be used is with customers or potential customers. It may not be the same process that you're going to use with your vendors or your suppliers. And so even though it's only deployed to customers, customer related approaches and processes, it's still very well deployed because that's where it's appropriate to be deployed. You wouldn't expect it to be deployed everywhere in the organization because it's not appropriate everywhere. It's appropriate there with customers in that case, as an example. When we talk about learning, when an evaluator, an examiner is looking at evaluating a company, they look for approach. They're going to be looking for deployment. They're going to be looking for learning. And learning is, as you can see, the acquisition of knowledge. It can be leading to individual development. It can lead to process improvements and process refinements, and or overall, gaining organizational knowledge. So it has a couple of different kinds of different types of learning. It might be individual learning. It might be from a process. You have a process. You've got some metrics. The learning might be how to make that process work better, and that's great. That's one type of learning. The learning might lead you to the idea that perhaps the people in the process need some more training, or they need to have some more learning in order to be better at working that process. That's a type of learning. And then another type of learning might be, let's think about the customer satisfaction processes again. If you've got a process that for a survey, let's say, and you're getting input, you're getting feedback from customers about the pros and cons of your product and the quality issues, well, that information then is going to be used in another process, in your production processes, in your operations, in order to improve those processes to meet the customer needs better. So you get learning in a lot of different ways, but that's what you look for. You look for that evaluation and improvement of processes. You're looking for how is that learning that's being gained embedded into an organization. A lot of times, when we talk about knowledge management is related to this. Some companies think, well, you've got to have a database. You got to have on a computer, you got to be able to go into an application of some sort and look up, a team A. They did a project on improving X. And okay, so we'll go in there, we'll learn that. Yeah, that's one part of learning, but that's not all about knowledge management. Learning is getting that knowledge and embedding it into your processes. So now the processes, the way I look at it, the processes are getting smarter. And if the process is getting smarter, that learning is embedded into your organization. If the person or the people who were involved in making that process better go away, they retire or whatever, that learning and that knowledge is still in the process. So that's learning. And integration is harmonization of plans. We hear about the harmonization of the quality systems and around the world and things like that. But here we're talking about within an organization, harmonizing the plans and the processes, the resources. And it's more than just alignment. Alignment means that you're aligned, you're in line with perhaps some localized goals, some local process goals and objectives. Whereas integration is looking beyond that. It's looking, how do your processes, how do your systems throughout your organization align with and truly integrate with the company vision, the mission, plans, measures, and so on. Strategic objectives. How does it really tie into what is the high level of what's really important to this organization? And so that's where integration comes in. And like I said, the ADLI is really the public view of ADLI. The plus I for innovation is something that examiners look at because it's so important. I think, Eduardo, you mentioned that earlier as a characteristic of a high-performing organization. You know, the systematic achievement of breakthroughs in processes and services and in your results. That's what innovation is. It's a step beyond just continuous improvement. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the innovation in your company is new to the world. I've done evaluations on a lot of different kinds of organizations, and there was one, I actually did a Sterling evaluation on a tax collector's office, believe it or not. And that year they didn't win the award, but they did in the later years once they improved. But one of the things that they did was well, let me ask, and you don't have to answer this, but it's a rhetorical question. How many of you have gotten your driver's licenses lately in the last couple of years and probably got it at a tax collector's office, okay? And that came from this tax collector's office that I worked with, or that I evaluated rather, where they decided to do things differently. You know, before, many of you don't even remember, but when you used to go to a DMV, you know, office to get your driver's license, it was like a whole day's outing. You know, you'd have to go and you'd wait forever. You'd wait on these lines and everything else. What this tax collector's office did with driver's licenses was they took innovation from other industries outside of the tax collector industry. Believe it or not, that's an industry. But they brought in this queuing system the way it worked was a person would come in, they would come in the front door, they would get a ticket that says, you know, driver's license, or a ticket that said, handgun license, or, you know, whatever. There's a lot of different services that happen in the tax collector's office nowadays because of this. And then they had the system with lights above all the people behind the counters, and it would tell you if it was, you know, if the next person to go to that counter was for a driver's license, or for a different kind of license, and they would adjust. They would be adaptable depending on how many people came in, and they knew that because of the system would tell them. That wasn't new technology. That had been used in a lot of other places. But when they brought it into the tax collector's office to help them, you know, make waiting times shorter and make people's times more effective and more productive while they're in the office, that's innovation. You know, even though it's not new to the world, it was new to that industry, and it worked really, really well. Now, like I said, you go to almost any tax collector's office in Florida, and you're going to see that system probably in use, and it's going to be for all kinds of different licenses and different services that are provided by the state of Florida. Okay, so when we look at the maturity levels, these are called levels. I call them, and a lot of other people call them buckets. But this is the scoring, you know, for the processes for categories 1 through 6. You can see it in a 0 to 5%. There's really no, no system, no processes, or everything is ad hoc. Seat of the pants, as I usually say. Then you can see it goes up to beginning, solidly systematic, less than 50%, and then, you know, greater than 50, fully systematic, and then role model systems, role model processes. You know, when you talk about innovation in this category here, in this box, this level, the 30 to 45% box, is where innovation starts to get talked about. You know, it's the beginning of innovative processes and innovative systems. You know, that's where it gets in, and then innovation really comes into play, you know, above that. But these, you know, if you were to look at a score, you know, always figure this is not a linear score, as you can tell, because not many companies are up in the top 2 boxes. You know, if you are in the top 2 boxes, you're probably going to be a winner for a Sterling award. You may or may not be a winner, depending if you're at the high end of that middle box there, that 50 to 65%. You might be a winner in that box, but you know, but what we're looking at there is really, really, you know, when you think of ADLI, really good approaches, really good deployment, really good learning, and really good integration, as well as innovation. So that's kind of gives you just a quick look at what the scoring is. You know, if you look at I started to say, if you're looking at an average company might be down in the 300 range, you know, 30% range or 25%. That might be average, believe it or not. The companies that I've seen, And I've done a lot of evaluations. I've done many, many evaluations over the last 20 years. And you know, an average company falls in down there between 2 and 3, you know, level 2 and 3 down near the bottom. You know, so you know, this is not, these scores don't correlate to what you might get in school. You know, and 95% is very, very, very difficult to attain in overall in a Sterling or a Baldrige evaluation. You might have one category or parts of a category that are up in that range, but for an entire organization to be up there, it's very difficult. It's always that continuous improvement. As I said before, it's not compliance. It always is the emphasis is on continuous improvement throughout. And so just to sample one of the levels, this is the 50 to 65% level that I showed you on the previous page. You can see this is the way it's written in the resource guide. You know, it says an effective systematic approach responsive to the overall questions of the item is evident. And then you see a little A. And you notice each of these statements has a letter, right? ADLI, you notice. And that's the way they're written. And so as an evaluator, an examiner of an organization, you're going to look at which of these boxes, you know, is it this 50 to 65 box or the 65, or rather the 70 to 85 box up above, or the 30 to 45 box below, which is the best fit? It's never going to be perfect, but you look for best fit and you know, as to which level that process, that category fits into the maturity scoring. Any questions about that? Is that pretty clear? I hope.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
So how are the processes really tested to assign a percentage? And then what if the process scores low based on this, but it's actually been working for the firm?
Well, okay, if it's actually been working, and I'm going to assume what you mean by working is that it's been effective
Right.
for the company. It supports, when I showed you before, it supports the strategy, supports the customer needs and customer requirements, right? All that.
Mm-hmm.
If it actually does all those things, and then it shouldn't be a low scoring process. You know, the effectiveness is determined by the results, but the process itself, you know, it could be very good, looks like a very good process. I mean, how do you judge the goodness of a process? Is by the result. You know, what do you get in the effectiveness? It could be very well deployed. And that's only means anything as long as the approach is good. If the approach is moot, you know, then deployment doesn't mean anything, and learning doesn't mean anything, and integration doesn't mean anything. But when you're, you know, if you got to take it all together, that's really where integration comes in. It takes everything together, not just the process itself, but the results. And how does that relate to the overall organizational needs? You know, what's important to the organization? What comes out of the organizational profile? What comes out of strategy, you know, sessions? What comes out of the strategic plan? All of those things. Does that make any sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. So just a quick look at this little chart here. So here's, you know, you've got an alignment, you know, to common goals here on the left axis, the left vertical axis, and on the horizontal you got integration. And then this shows the, you know, the vision, goals, plans, and measures of the organization. So if you've got just an approach and deployment, you know, an approach that and deployment that sort of fit into common goals, you know, maybe somewhat of a touch upon this, you know, you're kind of in that quadrant. And what that quadrant is really, it's really characterized by not very good alignment and not very good integration. You know, you've got to have alignment before you have integration. There's not really much of any of that. So you're lucky if, you know, you get an arrow that's looking in that direction. If one of, you know, some of your effort is going in the right direction, all these are going, you know, and then you get one of these. And it's not that function, that department, or that process is intentionally being bad. It's just that they have not really made the link, or leadership hasn't helped them make the link into what's really important to the company. We want to get all these arrows pointing in the same direction. That's this direction here. So you know, and that, by the way, is just a portion of the point. Here you might have some learning, high alignment, you have low integration still, but you still get some pretty good performance. You know, this might be an average type of company, or maybe a little bit above average type of company. And you'll see the arrows are a little bit more aligned, a little bit better at pointing the same way that the company wants to point. And then, down here, it's the same thing. They're kind of pointing in the way the company wants to go. Here you have low alignment, you have high integration. You still get some pretty good performance. So you might have some average or maybe slightly above average companies down in here. But where you really want to be is in the high maturity level, high level of maturity. Where every system, every process, every person is really lined up, and integrated throughout the organization with vision, goals, plans, and measures. And this is where you get really the 4 elements of that scoring, the ADL and I. And this is the role model performance, role model organizational performance. Okay, when we talk about results, now instead of ADLI, there's something called Let's See. Okay, Let's See plus I. And the I, in this case, is importance. But Let's See means that when you look at a result, you look at the level of the result. It's very quantitative. Is it at an acceptable level, or is it a role model level? You look at the trend, which way has it been going, favorably or unfavorably over the past, over the history. You look at comparisons. How is it performing? What is that level in comparison to a lot of different things? It could be in comparison to a standard. It could be almost an arbitrary target. It could be competitor performance. It could be role model performance. Of course, in that order, they get better. If it's just to a standard, that's kind of an average. It doesn't really tell you a lot. It might be to the standard, and it's satisfactory to pass the standard, and that's it. But it doesn't really say that you're a role model. You have role model high performance. So comparisons are important. Comparisons are important. Not only, well, they're important to really judge the how good is good. That's really what a comparison tells you. How good is good. You might be at 99.9% satisfaction on a customer survey, but the rest of the world is at 99.99999%. 99.9, just to the one place, is not doesn't look that good anymore. Even though it might sound good, it doesn't look good when you compare it to the rest of the world. Let's say, just as an example. And integration is related to the way I've already talked about integration in other aspects, other parts of what we've been looking at here. It's the integration of the goals and processes, reflects that harmonization, against the organization. What's really important to the organization? Does everything fit in? Is everything supporting that organizational arrow? And then importance is part of that as well. And like I say, the public part of Let's See is that Let's See. The plus I importance is really an examiner look at how they evaluate results. So they're looking at the importance. Is it an important area? If you were running, let's say, a police department or a sheriff's office somewhere, and you're not measuring, well, no, that actually wouldn't fit for that. If you were running a prison, let's say, or a jail, and you're not looking at recidivism, how frequently do inmates fall back on the bad side, go to the dark side again. If you're not looking at that, you're probably missing something that's very important to how your prison is operating, how your jail is operating, how effective is it? Because, supposedly jail and prison is supposed to rehabilitate people to go back into society and then perform as productive citizens. And if you're not looking at that as a measure for your jail management, you're missing something, and you may not be looking at measuring the right things. That's where importance comes in. How it ties to your mission and your vision. I've got another quick, let's see, another poll for you here about results. So it says results comparisons to role model performers are given equal weight as our internal targets when determining the level of performance. True or false? Results comparisons to role models are given equal weight as our internal targets when determining level of performance. Okay, that's about Another 2 seconds. Okay, good. All right, the results are what they are. 50-50. That's amazing. Okay, so what that question is saying, or that statement is saying, is that, you know, when you compare to a role model, that's equally as good as comparing to a target, you know, that you set for yourself. Now, the question is, if you're an examiner and you're looking at the company and you see them set comparing to targets, you say, how was that target set? If it was set based on a role model, then yes, that statement would be true. But if it's a target that was based just on a management decision, or maybe based on, and I know many of you have heard this, you know, based on last year, our target was 90%. Well, this year we're going to make it 95. It's kind of an arbitrary target. And so you've got to consider that when you're thinking about performance and effectiveness and you know, how high scoring or how effective those results show you actually being. You know, it's kind of like that how good is good that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Okay, let's go on. So this is similar to what we saw for the process scoring. This is results. You can see the buckets, the same, you know, 6 levels, and it looks at, you know, no measures poor performance, few measures poor performance, some measures, you know, that are important to the organization, good performance, many that are important to the organization, good performance, most good to excellent, and then role model, you know, excellent performance. So you can see the maturity, you know, obviously is better going up in this, and those are the scoring ranges for that. The results scoring, here's a sample of again, that middle bracket, 50 to 65%. And you can see each of these statements relates to levels, trends, comparisons, and integration. And so you're looking for best fit. And the processes are really what drive the results. You know, what are the processes that you've got in place? Are they the right processes? Are they integrated and addressing the right things for the organization? And that's what you're going to be looking for in any kind of an evaluation of an organization. Okay, key points regarding measures. So when you know, if you see a measure or the numbers of or activity, you know, that's a very low level measure. It's very difficult to get a comparison for that from anywhere, and it really doesn't lend itself well to any kind of analysis, right? If you're looking at averages, that's intermediate, as you can see, but as you know, that can really hide any inconsistencies in your process and the variations you see in your process. You know, the customer requirements, the degree to which customer requirements are met is a key measure of quality. We all know that, I think. And when complemented by comparisons to role model performance or correlated with customer retention or market growth, if there's some real basis behind the goal that you're setting on any process, for any result, you know, then that's a good thing. That's much more mature, and it really shows that you're basing, you know, any decisions on facts, making changes to your processes based on fact. Okay. So in the last part of the model is the organizational profile and then the categories of criteria. And we've talked a little bit about this already. These are the categories: leadership, strategy, customers, measurement analysis and knowledge management, workforce, operations, and results. The organizational profile, I mentioned before that processes really answer the question how, because you're looking for processes and systems. The organizational profile really answers the question what. You're learning about the company in that point, and the results are answering the so what. You know, if you've got the right processes to address the context that's described in the organizational profile, the whats, then the so what is appropriate. You know, the results that you're getting from the metrics of those important processes, integrated processes, is important. So it is a so what. It's, you know, it's a positive answer to the so what. Oh, I did have one question there. I wanted another quick question for you. Let's see, this one is about the organizational profile. Okay, so it says the organizational profile sets the expectation for what is important to measure in any company. Go ahead and answer. Take About 20 seconds on this one. Yeah, again, no fooling you on this one. Overwhelmingly, that's good. Overwhelmingly true. And it is true. That the context, as I've said many times tonight, I think that is really important. And really, you know, sets the stage for the criteria, how you're using the criteria to evaluate and to understand the measures. Are they the right measures? Okay, so organizational profile, and then you've got, here they are, the leadership strategy, customers, measurement, analysis, knowledge management, workforce operations, and then the results. And, you know, leadership talks about the, you know, senior leadership, and not individual so much as the leadership team and the leadership system in an organization, but also looks at, you know, societal responsibility and governance and transparency and those kinds of things. Strategy talks about development of strategy. You know, is there an approach? Is there deployment? Is there learning and integration? And then the implementation of strategy. Customers talk about expectation, engagement, you know, relationship building, communications, voice of the customer, listening and learning from customers, those kinds of things. Measurement, analysis, and knowledge management talks about performance improvement, you know, how you select the measures that you're using. How do you analyze them? Do you have a systematic way of analyzing? You know, you do in, you know, root cause analysis, or if you got some companies, organizations have something called quality clinics, whatever, you know, it looks at that. And then knowledge management, as I mentioned earlier with learning, is how do you maintain or grow the knowledge that you have in your organization? You know, if the knowledge is only in people in your organization, you're at risk of losing that knowledge when people go. And so you've got to be able to embed that knowledge into the company in some way, embedded into your processes, and you know, some way to retain that when people come and go. Workforce looks at the environment, you know, health and safety of employees, engagement and communications with employees, how involved are they in improvement, for instance. Operations is processes, looks at work processes, and, you know, business processes, support processes, all processes. And then the operational effectiveness, how are they managed day to day, et cetera. And then the results are just what they say, the results, the product and process results, customer results, workforce, leadership and governance results, and then financial market and strategy results. I think I've got a quick, another quick question for you here. Let's see. Oh, I still have the results shared up there. I'm sorry, somebody should have told me. Okay, here's a question on a quick question about innovation. Okay, which of these actions is an element of successful organizational innovation? Mark all that apply. It's a multi-step process of development. It's learning and knowledge sharing. It's harmonization of plans. It's only technology related. Okay, I'm gonna pull it here. We're getting low on time, and share the results. And you can see, yeah, it's not only technology. Yes, technology is a key piece. The example I gave you before had to do with technology, but it also had to do with mindset. It also had to do with process and the way processes were modified to accommodate the technology. But it wasn't just technology, and that's correct. It's not only technology related. Okay, that's off the screen now, right? Okay. So the kind of summary points for the Sterling Management System, you know, there's emphasis on processes, right? Categories 1 through 6 is the process, or the process categories. You know, it looks at well-defined and appropriately deployed processes. Processes should have outcomes and in-process measures. We didn't talk about in-process measures, but those are, you know, leading indicator measures is another way to say that. Processes are refined through multiple, you know, cycles of improvement. Processes should be integrated throughout the organization, and processes should be innovated throughout the organization. Results, the summary points, results, they're driven, as we said earlier, driven by processes. They should have favorable trends and be used as evidence of learning and actually used as a tool for improvement, learning for follow-on improvement. There should be comparisons to role models, and kind of the higher up the scale of comparisons, as we talked about before, the comparisons are necessary for really judging how good is good. Results should be among, the comparisons that are used for the results should be among, those for really high performing or even better than the role model comparisons that are being used. And results should be reported for all areas of importance to the company. And that brings us to the end, just about on time here. I hope it was useful to you. Anybody have any questions or comments about hold on. I missed the chat here. Let's see what else. Let me go through the chat and see if continuous improvement, strong communication. Oh, these were the, all right, I saw those before. Those were some of the characteristics of high performance companies, open communication. Okay, here's a question. How do you keep the process knowledge going strong as new employees join the organization to replace employees that helped build it? Okay, and that was Laren. I sort of answered that a little bit during the presentation. I don't know if it was before or after you wrote that question down, but it's, building knowledge into processes. Like I said, make the processes smarter with the knowledge that people have today. So, people will go and for a lot of different reasons. And when they go, you don't want to lose everything. You're not going to keep everything that they know and all their experience. Obviously, you're not going to keep any of their experience, but at least some of their knowledge and the knowledge about the skills that are important can be kept behind and stay with the organization. And that's important. One thing I didn't really talk about throughout all this is it's not only about high performing. What does really high performing mean to a company? Well, it means that they're successful today, but they're going to be enduring and be successful in a sustainable way over time. I didn't really talk about that, but knowledge management is a real important piece of that. Because if you lose that knowledge, what's going to happen to your performance? Your performance is going to dip, right? And the lower the shallower the dip and the shorter the dip is really what you're after. And you may not be able to eliminate the entire dip in performance, but if you can embed knowledge from employees and the workforce and things that the company learns, then you're much better off in that. Would succession planning be a big part of the learning metric? Absolutely. Succession planning, that was Raheem. Yeah, succession planning, and not just, most people when they think of succession planning, think of succession planning of management and leadership. And when I look at it, and when I do an evaluation on a company, I'm looking at succession planning of key skills that may be at any level. That will be in management and leadership levels for sure. But it's also going to be on the floor in a production facility. It's going to be in the offices. It's going to be in wherever the service is being produced and performed. Wherever the product is being produced is where succession planning for key skills is important. And companies have a difficult time with that. The companies that I deal with, anyway, most of the companies I deal with, always, very rarely do they have a good succession planning approach. I did an evaluation on one company that it was a manufacturing company. Had about 500, 600 people over in the Tampa Bay area. And their succession planning wasn't called succession planning, but they looked at how do they maintain key skills in their workforce. And what they did was every person had 3 jobs. One job was their primary job, and they would work at that job. It would be scheduled every week for 3.5 days. The second job, they would be scheduled at 1 day a week. And a third job, they would be scheduled at for half a day a week. So that means their primary job, there's 2 other people that are doing that job, that other extra day and a half that they were not working at that job. But what it did was it gave everybody fresh knowledge about the process. Typically what we see when you have a backup is the person runs the process 5 days a week. And, maybe in 2 months they go on vacation. And the person who learned that job 2 months or 5 months ago is rusty at the job, may not know all the up-to-date information about the process, all the changes that may have come, all the revisions to procedures or whatever. And so what this company did was it kept everybody fresh on all the requirements for all 3 of their jobs. So they always had a backup who was fresh at that job, and it worked really well for them. Let's see. How are the processes really tested to assign the percentage? Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I heard that question before. Yeah, it's a matter of, I mean, none of this is done in a vacuum. When a team goes in, the team is actually doing the evaluation. And there's a lot of, Sterling examiners, for instance, and Baldrige examiners go through a lot of training every year, not just the first year. When I was a 17-year examiner, I was still going through the training every year. I was doing some of the training myself, but yeah, everybody had to stay fresh because there are some changes that happen to the criteria, from year to year, minor changes, but it may be a little different perspective, a couple of different words or something like that. But it's just, it takes so much time to understand that we try to, what Sterling calls it is calibrating the examiners so that, any two examiners can go in and look at, evaluate a process. Let's make it simple, just one process, evaluate that process, and they should come back with pretty similar scoring. It's not always going to be perfect, but it should be pretty similar. And so when you get a team, the team looks at that, they work on it, they have come to consensus, they discuss, there's a lot of work that goes in, and they're pretty good from company to company to company, different teams coming back with scores that are relatively the same, if you know what I mean. So it's not easy to talk about and to train. It really does take some experience, but there is a lot of training behind it. Are there any local companies that have reached the role model level? That's a good question. I didn't look at the list. There are, in the what is it? 28 years, I guess it is. 28 years of Sterling, maybe 27 years of the actual evaluations. There have been probably over 100 companies, 100 organizations, and not and from all across all sectors. There have been government agencies, not-for-profits, healthcare, education, schools, elementary schools, high schools. There have been health departments. In fact, there's a good one that reminded me. The health department in Miami actually has won the Sterling Award 3 times, I believe, and they can't apply more than once every 3 years. So they applied over the course of probably 15 or 16 years 3 times, and they won 3 times. The health department in Broward last year just won for the first time. So those are 2 organizations I could think of right off the top of my head, but you get all kinds of organizations that are involved in Sterling and go through the process every year. And some of them don't go for the Sterling Award. They're in the Sterling system, there are lower level assessments, some self-assessments, things that are very developmental for the company to help them become better at what they do. So eventually one day they may want to apply for the Sterling. And that would typically, starting from scratch, I would say if you've got the right leadership in an organization, it would probably take 3 years at a minimum before you've got systems implemented to be able to adequately compete for a Sterling Award and possibly win it at that year. I appreciate your attendance tonight and listening to what I had to talk about here. I hope it was helpful to you. I hope it gave you some insight, maybe in your own organizations, things that you can go back, you can go to work tomorrow and try to improve. Take a look at it from a different perspective. That's really what I wanted to do, is help you change your perspective. Look at it from a different way. Look at it from a different angle.